Hello and welcome to another episode of The Business of the Starving Artist with Hayden Woods, where it's my job to try to get you from being a starving artist to at least a surviving artist. As a disclaimer, everything that I have done has been geared towards musicians and music teachers, though a lot of the lessons that we can grab from this can be applied to other areas, either in the creative field or just in self-employment in general. Today's episode, 1v5v10, refers to goal building, and specifically a 1-year versus a 5-year versus a 10-year plan. This is basically, at least the way I'm seeing it, a very more detail-oriented version of a bucket list where you're setting some timelines as to what you want to accomplish. And we'll start with mine, just to kind of walk through what the next 10 years looks like, at least in my vision. There are some things that I have taken, or that I'm not including in this just because I don't want to give anything away necessarily on the personal side. But we're going to start with as far as working goes. So the first thing I have listed out is my studio, is Hayden Woods-Music, and all of the students that I teach. The top line, for those that can see it, just says to maintain student count. For my audio listeners, I may create a shareable link to put in this episode so that you can also see this and kind of track along, with some other things removed after the fact. That's an obvious one. We want to always maintain at least the level of work and continuing to increase. We like to not see a decrease. 2020 was a perfect example of that. But within that, I specify that specifically I would like 30 students in the fall and 30 students in the spring. And for me, if I go to my calculator, we would see for how much I charge is $30 a lesson, a half an hour. That's about $900 a week, which translates to $3,600, which then, and I'll just say 50, which translates to about $45,000 a year. Again, that's like the goal. Now, with students getting sick, especially this time of year as winter approaches, and as I look towards the very end of the year where I take a week off in December around Christmas, then a week off around New Year's, just to kind of finish up any administrative work or bookkeeping, if you will, leading into the next year. So a lot of these goals that we have are going to be mostly geared towards what's 2024 going to look like in the 1 year. If we can maintain that within 5 years, it would be nice to either create online or on-demand music lessons, being able to capitalize on the fact that if I did lessons online, if I have to work on them, like if I'm sitting here and the students across the way on the other side of the camera, they could be a student not in my time zone. For example, again, I live in Montana, so we're on Mountain Standard Time, which is about 2 hours earlier than Eastern Standard Time. So I could get the East Coast and even some Central Time lessons knocked out at the beginning of what would be my lesson time before I go out into the field. And that would just kind of add to the student count and open it up a lot more. In the 10-year, the long term, it might be good to have an actual location for folks to go to. But this is staying in the long term, just mostly dependent on where we land as far as careers go for myself and my girlfriend. So we'll kind of see what that looks like. If we end up having to move, I'll just have to replace that with rebuild. But knowing what I know now, should be a lot easier. In the 5-year, I also have this idea, if I continue my trajectory as it is right now, I would maybe need to start thinking about hiring a second teacher, which would create the need potentially for moving from being self-employed into creating an LLC where I'm an owner operator. And on one of my sticky notes, I have specifically sole proprietorship versus an LLC to kind of look and see what would be the best option. So that'll be a future episode in itself. And then if I can maintain my online resources, if I build them in the 5-year, if I can maintain them in the 10-year, I'm hoping that by that point, everything would be sustaining, which would then allow me to focus on other things. The summer series is a set of lessons that I usually give in the summer for those who normally can't take lessons during the school year, whether it's because my schedule is filled up or whether theirs is kind of busy, because again, they're students have a lot to do. I mostly just want to adjust it next year and kind of decide whether it's going to be an 8-week program again, like it was this past summer, or if I want to do 10 weeks and kind of meet in the middle from the first year that I did that program. Other than that, the obvious goal is just to maintain all of my short terms, and then maybe in the 10-year, once again, depending on how things go, maybe start introducing a scholarship-like program for those who enroll in my courses that can help with funding for school for at least, I want to say at least the year that they apply. So the year that they move on from my studio, but go into like higher education, like college, because I know exactly how expensive college education can be. And I got pretty lucky by not having as much debt as some others, but still debt nonetheless. Moving on to the next part, the ensemble. I've basically listed the 3 things that I'm in right now, which is the big band that plays every other week in Bozeman, the municipal band, which is basically just like a wind ensemble that plays in the summertime. It's mostly community driven. I usually perform as a musician / section leader, but then occasionally, if they have room for it, I will also conduct a concert or two. Within the 5-year, and again, this is within 5, so I could do this one a lot sooner if I found the time and the resources to do it. I could form my own group, and I would like to form a performing group of just like a jazz quartet of sorts to either perform my own music or, again, kind of like how we usually start, just break open the real book, which is a collection of hundreds of jazz standards, and start picking and choosing and then getting out there and gigging around. With the intent that in 10 years, and especially with more originals, perhaps we can take this a little bit more regionally. I'm not going to say nationally. I'm just going to say regionally right now to kind of set some realistic expectations. Other projects in my 1 year, this podcast is obviously one of them. The idea is to have around 50 to 52 episodes uploaded, which would allow for 1 full year worth of content that I could continue to grow if this podcast takes off. Now, I also have my what if this kind of just stays stagnant and it's mostly just a few people catching in now and then. I'll leave everything up, but then that just leaves me with 50 to 52 episodes worth of info that I could collect to start writing a book on this premise of being a creative and how to actually work and survive in this as someone who has been doing this for a while. And obviously by the 5-year mark, I will have hit 10 years of teaching. On the financial side, I had to remove some of the play investing names just because I will not be giving those kind of recommendations. I will just kind of show you what it is that or how much of something I have. It's in the investment tracking sheet at the top of the screen. This nobody will see outside of this episode unless I choose to provide more. But essentially, it just means that if you want to do something like this, you're going to have to do your own due diligence and you're going to have to talk with your own financial advisor. But more on that later. The studio income is the main one. In the short term, we're going to maintain it across the board. But within my 5-year plan, and this is mostly just once 2025 hits, I may and most likely will do a rate increase to $35 per 30-minute lesson. And then in the 10-year, I kind of have a question mark around it because it's mostly just going to depend on the want for lessons, the market for it. I feel like right now we're at least fortunate enough where families want lessons right now, so we're going to continue to work as if we're going to continue as we we're going to continue as scheduled, but we'll kind of address it if I need to slow my increase or allow it to kind of do what it's doing. As far as my retirement goes, I mean, I've also picked a career that I don't plan on retiring anytime soon, but stuff is set up anyway, and I mostly just want to maintain that path. And this includes retirement and some basic life insurance. In the summertime, it might get a little difficult just because, again, when I see a typical drop in students, I want to free up as much extra income so that I can make sure that the basic bills are paid. I mean, right now during the school year, I'm trying to stockpile for next summer so that I don't have to worry about it, so that when I do the summer series lessons, that just can continue to add, and maybe I won't have to do this pausing every summer. Within savings, financially, it's mostly just trying to figure out how much I need just in case something happens. The first number is mostly just, here's my emergency fund. Something happens, I've got money on it. In the 5-year, it'd be nice to increase that to 10. And then by the 10-year long term, I would hopefully have enough to where, at least from the account that I'm using, it would just maintain its high interest yield. For my other investments, again, this is my play time money. This is where you are not going to do exactly what I'm going to do. You can do whatever you wish for it, but this is kind of me building on what I had done before switching to a financial advisor. For the first one, I will at least say that for this first one, which I will not be highlighting because I just realized that it would show up in the search bar here, I'm looking for around 4 shares of the specific stock, which I will at least say is a real estate trust, which allows monthly payouts, which is nice. So I'm hoping that it'll increase to 4 shares by the end of 2024. In 5 years, I wanted to be able to be paying $100 a month, and by the 10-year long term and beyond, really, it would be nice if that would pay the $1,000 a month, because that would basically take care of the tax side of things. For the non-real estate stock, I just wanted to pay 2 shares or 3, and then 3 and then 5. If I look over at the investment tracking sheet, I can see how much it's going to pay currently. So right now I can get about 2.36 or 2.37 shares of the real estate. I'm not so worried as much about the gain or loss in this one, because again, part of it's kind of play money, part of it is I'm just going to kind of leave it as a dividend income builder more so than a growth. That's what all of these down here will be for, and this is controlled by a retirement account, which I will have to censor some of these. The other account that we see down below where it's all red was just especially money that it was mostly experimenting with IPO stocks, which at least in my experience, I've only had one that worked out very well, and that was Newegg. And ever since I sold that, it's not really done a whole lot. So this is mostly just if it grows, great. If not, I'm not going to be too upset about it. It is $200 between the two IPO'd stocks, which again, not showing, but it's either going to 2x or it's going to go bust. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it at for the time being. Unless I absolutely need to withdraw from it, which right now is not a whole lot. So yeah, that's kind of my other investments side of things. And then we want to figure out some general life things, because again, this should be more than just your business side. I mean, you want, it's good to kind of plot out a lot more based on what you want to do and not necessarily in work. For example, next summer we're planning on traveling to Chile, which will be fun. I think it's mostly to go skiing. Either way, holding for more emergency service vehicles. And we're back. Had to cut for emergency vehicles. Where were we? Chile summer 2024. Then in the 5-year, I would like to maybe be in the process of buying a house, but given the market currently where I live, if we try to stay here, it's looking less and less possible at the moment, and we'll just kind of see what happens once we decide where my girlfriend's job takes us so that we can figure out what that plan's going to be. We can get into this more detailed as far as like planning. Again, kind of have a separate episode lined out for it, just because as a self-employed individual, there are things that you have to realize. The biggest one I'll just give right now is that they're going to base it off of your net income, which is after all of your expenses. So if you make a lot but you also deduct a lot, that's going to look a little tiresome, and it's not going to look like it's worth providing a mortgage to you for over. That rant is for a new episode. In the 10-year, the long term, I have the possibility of going to Japan. That'd be really cool. It's been kind of a dream of mine to at least go over there. At one point, it was about wanting to live over there, but I think I realized that would be a culture shock and kind of me avoiding the same problem that we're seeing here, where people are just moving here en masse to escape wherever they're at. So there's that. And then, as kind of a joke, but also given my life experience, I just need to survive my midlife crisis, which by this point I'd be 41. So hopefully I'm a little past that by this point. Yeah. So if you want to build your own 1v5v10 plan, categorize it around So if you want to categorize your 1v5v10 plan, it would mostly just be focus on your work first. Like, what do you want to see with your creative field? Are there any other projects outside of that or alongside it that you would like to see continue? What do you plan to do with the money you receive from that? And then, again, just some general life stuff. Again, this is kind of a very detailed version of a bucket list. I've got a very generalized one on my phone, which is mostly me kind of telling myself what I should hopefully be doing, such as, again, buying a house. We'll see what happens. The investment in the financial side, getting that $1,000 a month. We'll try it with just the real estate one. Japan was on there. The podcast is on here to hopefully gain a sizable following. Staying sober and getting past said midlife crisis. So mine's not a huge bucket list, but at least there are things that I'm kind of thinking about. There's some like dream things on there, like having a dream car, like what's mine is an Aston Martin, but that's also, again, kind of a later down the road thing. It would be nice to just have a practical car to start with. But that's kind of where we can leave this off. With that being said, thank you so much for tuning in to episode 8 of The Business of the Starving Artist. If you like what you're hearing or seeing, please give it a share. Every little bit helps as we try to gain our footing. As I get more comfortable with sitting in a room all by myself talking into a camera, which is already weird in itself. If the cats aren't around, I don't see either of them here today or right now, but it kind of helps me practice again if I wanted to start teaching online lessons again, or gaining all this information and getting it somewhere more tangible. So every little bit helps. I do have the Venmo tip jar on screen. For the audio listeners, it'll be in the description. Every little bit helps. And with that said, thanks, and until next time.